Welcome to Indie Depth, the show where we go in depth with independent filmmakers about their filmmaking process. I'm your host, Andrew Froning, and today with me I have Colleen Brady, a documentary filmmaker. Her series, it's a documentary series, Geronimo, the series. And it's won 2 awards for Best Documentary and 1 for Best Message. And she's also a Telly Award-winning editor. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course. So documentaries are super interesting, and I think you're my first person on the show who is primarily a documentary filmmaker.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mostly was into narrative filmmaking in the beginning and obviously in school because that's primarily what they focus on. And documentaries kind of fell into my lap, with Geronimo, especially because I knew I wanted to make something and the story just, it was a very serendipitous process. And I was like, yeah, move over narrative. Let's try a documentary. Why not? So,
That's neat because a lot of times we discover what we're good at through whatever we were pursuing before, and then it just kind of finds us and takes a grip, and you're like, yes, this is where I need to put my energy.
right. Yeah. The opportunities just, present themselves to you and you're like, I gotta follow this.
Now, with some of my work, I work at an environmental company, and we do a lot of videos based on our certain projects that we've done. And some of the stuff, it gets a little almost fantastical at times when we go like treasure hunting and we're using metal detection equipment for that. So that I've done some documentary ish things, never really a long form documentary, but I just love how you can come into it. All you do is you have a video camera, maybe some audio equipment, and you don't know what you're going to get at all on the day.
Right. Yeah. One of my favorite quotes about documentary is by Alfred Hitchcock. He said, um, when you're making like a narrative movie, this is, I'm trying my best to quote it, but when you're making a narrative film, the director is God, but when you're making a documentary, God is the director. And
Mm,
so you're really just whatever comes to you, whatever opens itself up to you, you just have to take that into account and you just have to make it work, you know?
right.
And I think that kind of opportunity to improvise and to internalize the story and just do your best opens up a lot of creative venues of the types of stories you can tell and the types of truths you can explore, really.
Hmm. And you have to be kind of attuned to what's going on, to tell the story truthfully, but also to know that eventually you're going to have to tell a story with this. You're going to have to put it into some format, and I imagine being an editor kind of helps with that.
Right. I also wrote a bunch of short narrative scripts that were eventually made. And so that helped a lot with understanding a lot of story archetypes and character archetypes and being able to mix and match. And I think in order to really be confident with documentary filmmaking, you have to have a pretty intimate knowledge of story structure.
Hmm.
And just whatever you come across on the day when you're filming, you just pick and choose things and you say, oh, that would really work well for this kind of archetype. This would work really well for this archetype. And eventually you find that it'll lead one way or another and almost build your case for whatever path you do end up taking.
Okay.
But I think for the most part, you can go like several ways in the editing room and eventually like the footage will line up for like one way, like you should go this path.
Sure.
So
Now, when you talk about the characters, it's kind of weird because I always think of a character as someone that you create, but
right.
these are people who exist, and they're built in, and you don't really know the character sometimes going in. How do you hone that down, and what's the importance of a character in a documentary story?
That's a really good question. Um, I think just being a genuine person, first off, and just talking with them, getting to know them, having a rapport, understanding where they come from. I have a lot of background in interpersonal communication, and through that, you learn a lot about how people perceive the world linguistically and the kind of stances they take when in a conversation, because some people can approach it offensively or defensively or passively. And you start learning a lot about how that person would act throughout their life with different different obstacles in their life.
Hmm.
And so obviously real people aren't, fictional characters and you can't bend them to your will, but there are truths to character archetypes being close to who we are as people. They are based off who we are as people. So, um, yeah, I think you can learn a lot about that and obviously not go purely off of stereotypes and archetypes, but um, you get a little more insight by applying that knowledge to real people.
That's interesting how you're able to bridge those two disciplines, because they're so separate, but
Right.
fundamentally you're making a film, and a film needs a story. So I just find that fascinating how you're able to take that, especially with characters, because that's something I really hadn't thought of. Like, for what I'm doing, it's usually the story is the equipment that is going into use, and like how that can benefit, or the environment is kind of like the main focus, but never a character. So that's really cool.
Yeah. I also went into, so a little background on Geronimo. I went into it just wanting to know more about aerial acrobatics and circus arts. I had been a competitive gymnast for 10 years,
Oh,
and that requires like a lot of physical strength, a lot of mental strength, a lot of discipline. And I found that aerial acrobatics was very similar in that respect. You're hoisted into the air by like 10 feet, and you have to get over that mental um, like obstacle to be like, it's okay. I know I can do this. I know like, how to fall. And because in those types of sports, like, how to fall so that you don't hurt yourself that badly.
you fall sort of like the best possible, the safest way you can fall, but it still hurts.
Right. Because I remember I learned how to, when I was learning more advanced tricks, I learned how to fall in a way that it broke my pinky toe, but it wouldn't break my ankle. So I did break my pinky toe, but that's better than my ankle.
Easier to heal than not walking.
Right. So at first, I just wanted to explore that subject matter completely. Um, like the beginnings and how people get into it and their trainings and all that fascinated me. But what happened was when I was reaching out to people and acro yoga studios, I found my two subjects, Kate and Regina, and suddenly it turned from a documentary about like a broad subject to two portraits because they were such strong characters. They were so resolute in their belief system and their stories, and it just felt like they totally took away from the subject. They were their own stories. And so that's why it kind of shifted from like a plot-based thing to a character-based thing. So,
That's
yeah.
interesting, because I've noticed a lot of documentaries, and even something like Ninja Warrior, the American version, they started to really focus on the people. Like, this is my background, this is my gym, this is my family, this is my disciplined morning routine, and you start to feel something for the person. Tiger King is
Right.
like the ultimate in character documentaries.
Mm,
I have you seen that?
yeah. Oh my gosh, that's a wild ride. And I find that character-driven documentaries are the most impactful. Like we're no longer going into a phase of documentary that's like your grandfather's documentary, where it's on this like boring, just
Right.
bland subject and old photos just bouncing from corner to corner on the screen. Like we're really focusing on people who personify the subject matter now. And I think that's what makes us connect so much better to it. Like, would we? I mean, granted, I think we would still care about tigers in captivity because they're adorable, but Tiger King is so unique because of all those different really radical characters. And so you start connecting so much more and becoming so much more passionate about what they're talking about. So
Right.
yeah, I think um, your subject can really make or break your documentary. Yeah.